I just want to make an update on the situation in Ukraine because there's been some interesting developments today, unsettling developments I should say as well. Basically what we have been seeing is, I'm just looking up some references here, I took pictures directly from the news actually. Yeah, basically in the latest developments the Ukrainian military has been forced to take action against Russian militants, Russian-backed militants in the east of the country. In cities like Kharkiv, Donetsk, armed men have forcefully taken over government buildings. And this may be the closest we've got yet to a war situation. There's been reports that there's been 11 killed today. They can't be verified, but clearly the situation is escalating. It's not going back, it's escalating. But this UN report, it was a UN human rights report on Crimea and the situation there. And it basically damned the referendum because that referendum, as I suspected, was done under an atmosphere of intimidation of the Ukrainian population, something that Russian state media will certainly not report. And the backdrop of that referendum was an avalanche of pro-Russian propaganda pumped out to the Crimean population. Now it's true that there probably is a majority of Crimeans are pro-Russian anyway, but clearly in any referendum, when you have one side that gets all its views and another side that gets no views, that is not a fair referendum. Now in the UK, just to make a comparison, we're going to have a referendum this year on Scottish independence. That's been roughly 50-50 in terms of how much exposure both sides have got. That's a fair referendum. What we saw in Crimea was not a fair referendum, and it was done under the backdrop of the Russian army. I mean, in that context, how can you honestly call it a free and fair referendum? That's what I suspected at the time, and that's been confirmed today by a UN report. I think that these developments are concerning because there's a lot of echoes here, which I said in the last video of Yugoslavia. Now, a few days ago, Sergei Lavrov claimed that Russia isn't meddling in Ukraine, that they don't have anyone on the ground and so on. But press that have been there have said that those militants that they have seen are wearing Russian uniforms and they look very similar to the people who annexed the Crimea. So that indicates that either they have borrowed the uniforms, they are Russian soldiers, or they're backed by Moscow. They are backed by Moscow, I think that's pretty obvious. And in the latest developments, Putin is saying that the international community should condemn Ukraine's actions. What all Ukraine has done is acted to restore stability within its territorial space, as any country in the world would do, as Russia done in Chechnya. And what Russia done in Chechnya was kill thousands and thousands of civilians. Now, the Ukrainian government, unlike Russia, has shown enormous restraint on the situation. Russia's attitude to everything is brute force. Ukraine, by contrast, has shown a lot of restraint. In fact, the restraint, in my opinion, is very admirable. Partly because they can't take on the force of the Russian bear, but also because they realise that it would escalate the situation. And the last thing the Ukrainian government wants is civil war. I'm not quite sure what Russia's thinking is right now. Certainly Putin is hell-bent on trying to subjugate satellite states in order to restore the Russian Empire, but I'm not sure if Russia would gain from Ukraine breaking up the way Yugoslavia did, but that looks like that is what's going to happen. There was another development in this UN report. The spokesman, his name was, I'm just quoting this because I can't remember off the top of my head, Ivan Simonovich. He's the UN Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights. I took this directly from, just in case you're wondering, on my camera from a CNN report. He's a UN Deputy Assistant Director of Human Rights. He's a Croatian, but he's a UN representative, right? And he has said that there was an investigation done into Russia's claims that Russian speakers were being abused in parts of Ukraine. Now, what that study found, that there were cases of Russians being abused in, for example, some racist attacks, that sort of thing, by far-right elements on the Ukrainian side. But they also found, and this is very important, those incidents were not widespread, they were not systematic. Now, the way Russia's been talking, you would think that the Ukrainian state is imposing violence against its Russian minority. This report shows that that is not the case. And this seems to me to be a bit like a situation, let's say for example, you have an Indian student who's attacked in the UK, a British Indian student, in a racist attack. That would be like India declaring war on Britain as a result. Russia is using this as an excuse for their militarism. And I've always said that there's unsavoury elements on the Ukrainian side. I've never made out the Ukrainian side to be angels. But in any revolution you're going to have different factions. So yes, there are far-right factions. I've never disputed that. But I don't think their power is strong enough for Russia to justify what it's doing. What we're seeing here is just the latest escalation. I'm fairly sure that Russia has sent in mercenaries to stir this shit up, and it's unsettling, because this looks like what's happening in Yugoslavia, and a lot of the thuggish elements are coming from the Russian side. They're acting with force, they're aggressively imposing their will on the Ukrainians, and it's a very tense situation. I don't know how this could de-escalate at this stage. I understand Obama's phoned Putin to say that he should use his Russian influence to rein in, on these Russian insurgents, for want of a better term. But Putin is obviously not going to do that. He's just taking their side and saying it's justified. So Russia takes a very large part of responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of escalating this whole thing. That's my position. I have looked at different sources. I haven't just looked at Western sources. I have looked at RT reports, even knowing full well it's a Kremlin mouthpiece. In the interest of fairness, I have looked at them, but nothing convinces me otherwise. Russia has escalated this, and Russia is going to have the judgment of history on its hands if this turns into a bloody civil war.